don't put so much on one thing. Permaculture is a holistic ecological design methodology, and yes, it does have philosophies attached with it, and it can, I would even say, lead us to have these kind of spiritual realizations, especially when we realize that we are part of nature. But I encourage my students to not put so much on permaculture and not think that it can solve everything.
All right, hello everyone. I'm here with Neal Hegarty in the farm Tz'ikin in Guatemala, in the village 𝕨𝕨, and I'm here to interview him about his special project here, which is related to the book that the team and I are working on called Experience Archiarchy, which is a travel guide book for people that look for communities, next culture communities, archiarchal projects and nano-nation that they can travel to and meet instead of going on the normal beaten path of the tourist. So hello Neal.
How you doing, Dor? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for taking this interview. I appreciate your time.
No problem. Pleasure.
And we'll start with just some basic question about your project. Can you share what is the name of the project? How many people are involved in that?
Yeah, the project is, well, the name of the project is Granja 𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒. That name, Granja, means farm in Spanish, and 𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒 is one of the Mayan 𝕒𝕚𝕒𝕟𝕜, one of the 20 𝕒𝕚𝕒𝕟𝕜s, and it signifies really abundance. And the symbol, every one of the 20 𝕒𝕚𝕒𝕟𝕜s, which mark the Mayan calendar, have like a symbol, usually an animal attached to them. The symbol of 𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒 is the seed, and it's all to do with abundance. And the idea in Mayan cosmovision was that birds are the carriers of seeds and the carriers of messages, and they're connected with the notion of abundance. So that's very much tied in with the mission of our project, which was to use permaculture design to bring health and abundance to our community.
So I see this significant here around animals and the connection to nature. And here we are in Lake Atitlán, in this very special area. Would you say a few words about your project connected to this area? And
yeah, well, there's a slight division between this project. Granja 𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒𝕒 is one project on its own, but me and my wife, the project is run by me, my wife Adriana Cortez, who's a Colombian ecologist, and my partner and good friend Jeremy Fellows, who's also a permaculture designer, builder, project manager. So we're in year 5 of the project now. So at this point, we've kind of established a model that works for the farm. We run a farm-to-table restaurant. We grow organic vegetables, salad greens, herbs and root crops. We keep goats and we produce dairy, and we keep chickens and we produce eggs, and we make a lot of compost as well to keep the gardens happy and fertile. And at this point that's insulated, it's its own project, and we also run a guest house where students, volunteers and visitors can just come and, you know, eat well, live well, and kind of like live in community. So that's one project, but a lot of our work in Guatemala has been around doing permaculture design and running permaculture projects, and so we've spent a lot of time designing landscapes for other people who've moved to not just the 𝕨𝕨 but to the lake in general. And we always use, you know, the same permaculture principles. And a lot of our focus always has been on managing water, because, as you say, yeah, we live in a lake here. The topography, the lake is a bowl basically, and it's surrounded by volcanoes, and so really what happens here is every time it rains, the water, you know, runs down the mountains and into the lake, and so a lot of the premise of permaculture is about slowing down water flows and prolonging the time that water spends on the landscape, so that you get as much infiltration as possible. We live here as well. It's an interesting climate. It's the wet, dry highland tropics, let's say. So that means we have 6 months of heavy rains and then 6 months of drought. And so a lot of the work that we've done in our projects over the years has centered around harvesting as much water as possible on those landscapes, creating terraces, ponds, and also underground filtration systems. We've done quite a few projects here where we found where we have properties that have like dirty water, grey or black water flowing actually through the property from nearby communities, and so we've developed systems where that water can be actually treated on site and filtered using plants. And
wow.
so
So important.
every little counts. The lake is a precious ecosystem, and it is, if things continue as they are, it is going to die. No, it's such a huge amount of water that it can withstand the inflow of nutrients up to a point, but not forever, and the quality of the water in the lake is degrading every year, and that's something that worries us greatly. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is we're collaborating with the NGO Water for Life, and we're hoping to be able to raise more money to use a lot of the systems and technologies that we've implemented on privately owned land, and which is very kind of appropriate. Essentially, the approach is always the same. It always centers around slowing down overland flows, moving it more slowly across the landscape, and turning it into a resource. So our vision there is really to take some of the models that we've developed in the past and get funding to be able to do them on local people's land, and to thereby clean the watershed and improve the resource base at the same time. So that's one of our big kind of dreams and visions for the future now, I would say.
Wow, thank you for doing that. It's so important. I'm walking around this lake and there's so much, you see so much sewage and gray water flowing around, and really you see it flowing to the lake. And I love this image of you kind of like taking care of other people's messes, and creating something out of it, creating a resource out of that. And that's for me what is radical responsibility is. And I hear you're taking a stand for that.
Yeah, we're trying our best. I mean, I've been in Guatemala since 2008, and I chose permaculture as a career and a life choice for a reason, because I recognized early on that a lot of the problems of this country, because at its base really permaculture is just resource management first and foremost, right? And a lot of what I recognize is that Guatemala is actually inherently a very rich country. There's tremendous resources here. There's a lot of water. There's a huge amount of microclimates. Just about everything grows here. But as anyone who knows watching this, and anyone will recognize who's lived in developed countries and worked in environmental issues, really all environmental issues are actually socio-political issues. So it's a complicated, slow process, because you can't just make people do things. But what you can do is you can show that there are alternatives out there that make sense, and that aren't just these kind of like martyrism things. There are actually systems that can be put in place that will improve the quality of people's lives and improve their access to resources. And so, our hope is really to lead by example, essentially. And we're not the only ones. There's lots of other people doing it, and a lot of the people who've moved to 𝕨𝕙𝕒𝕟𝕟𝕟𝕜, foreigners in particular, and also people from Guatemala City, they've also adopted these practices, and so that's, that gives us something to be hopeful about, let's say.
Wow, so important. Thank you. So when someone comes into stumble upon here as a maybe reads about it somewhere as a student or a traveler, So how can he participate in this project without, you know, just you have beautiful best breakfasts, like definitely come check out the breakfasts, like everything is organic and made locally with the farm, great cheese. And how do you like someone that doesn't come only to enjoy by that, but how he can participate in a
Yeah, well, we run courses here, not all the time, but we run courses. We do a few courses here every year. We're actually currently trying to decide on the dates for our next course, but we've put, both Jeremy and I have many years of experience of working as permaculture designers, and we've developed our own kind of curriculum. We actually focus on giving shorter, more intense courses, as opposed to the traditional 2-week permaculture design courses, because a lot of our focus over the last couple of years in terms of education was on taking the typical 2-week long PDC, which lots of other people do, for one thing. So we wanted to do something a bit different, and so we kind of came across what we call like our accelerated learner program, where we take really what we consider to be the key learnings. We've developed our own note packs and drawings and library of designs that we just did over the years, and we give these kind of short, intense 2 to 4 day courses where we try to get those key ideas across to people to empower them to become permaculture practitioners wherever they are. And then you can also come and work here as a volunteer. We have a volunteer program. Well, I'd say it's more like a volunteer internship program. So that's designed for people who want to, you know, come and study with us, but also get the practical experience. So we have a fully, at this point, we have like a fully working farm. We have our central things to the farm, which is our, like I mentioned earlier, our goats, our chickens, our compost production, and our organic veggies. And so people who come here for 2 to 4 weeks can kind of like cycle through all those different activities and see how it works. So we only accept volunteers who want to really commit and who are really into learning, because the reality is our farm, it does just, at this point, it kind of works. And that's the idea with permaculture design anyway, is to set up these systems that do just work, and then hopefully be able to show them and teach them to other people.
Yeah.
And then the same accelerated learner program that we've created for foreigners, we're now starting to work with NGOs from around Guatemala, and they're sending us groups of campesinos, which means kind of like rural farmers, to come and see some of our practices so that they can apply those practices in their areas as well. So that's another thing that we're quite hopeful about.
So you're affecting not only the people that come here as students, also working with NGOs and people around the area.
Yeah. There's a concept in permaculture which is, you know, says that you want to work, you'll have a circle of influence and a circle of concern, and your circle of concern might well be the whole world, but your circle of influence is quite likely very small. And so the idea is you work within your circle of influence. You work on your own piece of land, your own front yard, whatever you can actually affect. And as you do that over time, at least in theory, the circle grows, and that's very much what we're seeing now, I think. And I've had the fortune as well of getting to be invited to work with some large landowners, some Guatemalan families who have big piece of land and are now really interested in other parts of the country, and are now really interested in applying permaculture on a large scale, and not just for them and their family, but also setting up you know, initiatives that benefit the local communities there as well. Because like I say, everyone recognizes this who lives in countries like Guatemala. The environment and the socio-economic situation are just, they're inseparable. So, you know, there's a lot of complex problems to sort out, actually, and the longer I'm around, the more complexity and the more nuance I see. But we're taking the little steps that we can, you know.
Yeah, and it seems like it's working. I look around here and everything seems to be ticking. So something you're doing is working. Yeah. Funnily enough, this year, especially for me, was the year of stepping back from the farm. I know I'm really trying to,
I'm actively trying to do. If I'm lucky, I get a day or so a week where I work in the garden, but it's more for my own therapy than for the good of the garden.
All right. So, would you share a bit about that special context that you have here in the farm? What's your relationship to radical responsibility? I heard already about taking care of the environment, the land, working with communities around here, and maybe about something more of your purpose of initiating this context as I would call it a game world builder, someone that build this system or network of things happening with certain guidelines, certain. And I heard you speak about permaculture. I wonder what's more of your special intention in it, or your purpose in that as a game world builder. Share about that.
Yeah. So, I guess for me, permaculture it goes very much. It goes very much along with people who subscribe to this notion of radical responsibility or personal responsibility, and you know, I guess I'll just talk about my own sort of unique individual cosmovision when it comes to this sort of thing. I try to live my life, you know, in integrity, and I don't always manage it, and I make mistakes, and I've made some in the past. For many years, I worked in 𝕿𝕠𝕟𝕟𝕜 as a project manager. So I would design landscapes, houses, you know, and then I would manage the crews that built those things. And you know, to be fully honest, there was like, I made mistakes on those projects because I found that when I was able to be in control of everything, i.e. like on this farm or building my own house, it worked one way, but it was harder and more challenging to manage projects where I wasn't able to be there all the time. And one learns a lot from these experiences, and so that's just, you know, everyone in their life is going to try things, do new things, take feedback, and learn from those things. And as long as someone is taking responsibility for like the mistakes that they make, doing their best to make up for them, you know, one will continue to grow and evolve as a human being. And I think the thing about networks is also incredibly interesting to me, because you know, life is difficult. that's you know, that's something that I probably didn't realize until I was in my until I was somewhere along in my 20s. I thought that life was supposed to be easy, and I probably grew up a little bit with this sense of like entitlement. But life is difficult, and I somehow now realize that it's supposed to be difficult. And I think a life, you know, a life well lived is one where we do continue to not worry so much about what everyone else is doing, and to focus on what we're doing, what we can learn, where we can improve. And my belief is that if one does that, one positively affects the people around them. So that attitude of taking responsibility for things, continually learning, is to me extremely important, as is the attitude of treating yourself as, you know, treating yourself and your own life as something sacred. That's something that it took me like a long time to realize the importance of that as well, and to really not just become radically responsible, but to become radically, how do I say it, caring for my own self, and to really realize that my own mental health, physical health is of paramount importance, not just to me, but to my wife, to my business partners, to my son, and I think when you take those types of attitudes, permaculture then fits in nicely with that, because permaculture is actually, it's just ecological literacy at its foremost, right? And so some people will say things to me like, they'll be saying, oh, we think that permaculture doesn't go far enough because it doesn't include self-care or social justice or this, that and the other. And I often say, it's like, don't put so much on one thing. Permaculture is a holistic ecological design methodology, and yes, it does have philosophies attached with it, and it can, I would even say, lead us to have these kind of spiritual realizations, especially when we realize that we are part of nature. But I encourage my students to not put so much on permaculture and not think that it can solve everything. But when combined with, when you take an individual that's committed to growth, committed to taking responsibility for their lives, and you inform them with this incredibly useful, practical, holistic design science, that's a great combination. If does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's almost answer my next question. And I hear that you're saying that not to put all the emphasis on permaculture, but also on inner permaculture, like how do I take care of myself and grow and take responsibility. And I like some of these questions that I'm asking are kind of doorways for people that are watching this to integrate this kind of thoughtware in their project, in their life. And so and you kind of start answering it, but I wonder what the people that are part of this project, what kind of, let's say they're working on their growth, but they're getting stuck with something, or people, you worked with teams, as you said, so you probably ran into a lot of like these problems.
Mm-hmm.
So people have emotions about stuff, or people need some feedback, like you said. I hear that you're responsible about that, like getting feedback and improving and accepting that I do mistakes, but also like how someone that comes here to work on that project, what kind of trainings or how can he grow and learn from that? What kind of practices do you have here?
I'm actually just transitioning, like I said, out of a career as a full-time project manager, more into a career as a designer and a coach, because now my big revelation from last year, and this is again the whole point about continually growing, continually taking feedback. I'm now 41 years old, and I realized partially I never really had the right personality to be a project manager. I did it because it was sort of what I needed to do when I was in that phase of just needing to, survive, make money, have money to invest in this place. But it was never really in alignment with who I really was. And now with the experience I've accumulated for that, one of my kind of aha moments was that there was a few actually over the last while, but one of them was that we really want to pick careers that are aligned with who we are, deeply in our core. And so that's a practice that anyone who's interested in growing as a person, that's a great place to start. Know thyself. I think Aristotle said that, right? It's a really ancient piece of wisdom, and everyone's different. And there's great personality profiles you can do, human design, astrology, Mayan Nawales. Look at all of those things and really think deeply about who you really are, and design that's one of your main parameters for designing a life for yourself, I would say. But I've become fascinated. We're just launching a new platform called Permagrowth, and the premise of the platform is exactly what you asked me about. It's based on the idea that we want, as human beings, for our landscapes, our farms, our communities to be in a state of perpetual growth, but we also want ourselves to be in this state of perpetual growth. And the same way that we can apply, I think, quite simple principles to set up a landscape to grow continually, we can also do those things for our landscape. And I'll give you an example to illustrate that, right? So growth in nature is a fascinating thing to observe, right? How is it that, you know, nothing exists and then something exists, and new life forms come into existence all the time? And so what we see in nature and what we see in a stable ecosystem always is three things. We see sustainability. Take a forest, for example, of a stable ecosystem, right? So we see sustainability, and that's reflected in stability, right? We also see destruction and death all of the time. Trees fall, animals die, plants die. And then we also see the creation of new life. And so stable ecosystems and healthy ecosystems are always doing those three things in parallel, right? And the last one is the most interesting in a way. Like, how is it that evolution actually works, to the sense that, you know, once there were no butterflies and then bam, you get butterflies coming out, and no one can really explain that. And something that fascinated me for years was this concept that people talk about in ecology and permaculture of edge, right? That the space between two ecosystems is referred to as the edge, right? But the space between two elements is the edge. So the space between a lake or a pond and the dry land, the space that's both of those things at the same time.
Yes.
Those zones are magic. And the more you look into ecology, and the more you kind of, like I said, become literate in ecology, the more you'll start to see these zones where everything that exists in the lake and everything exists in the forest is coexisting in this border, but a whole new set of life that only exists on the edge is also present. And that's the space where things come from. And you know, poets and mystics often write about the space between things as well, right? And so, and you know, Leonard Cohen, my favorite writer, said that there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. And I think he's talking about the same thing in a way. And so, okay, so where am I going with this? Well, so in order for creation to happen in nature, we need two things fundamentally. We need stability, right? So a forest is stable. All of the water that falls in it doesn't just run over the surface. It soaks in. The hydrological cycle shortens. You get shade and you get stillness. You also get a lot of edge because you have so much diversity that you have so many spaces between different things. And that's why the more productive or the longer an ecosystem, you know, remains in a space, the more possibilities it creates for new life to emerge. And that's what this planet does. It produces the conditions for new life to emerge, and then it just does. And ideas and creativity are like that within us, in our kind of own personal internal landscape. And so one of the things I really encourage my students and clients to do is to mimic that, is to create a life that has stability in it, but also edge. So you don't want to be too comfortable, but you don't want to be uncomfortable, right? So how do we create stability? Well, we create stability with routines and habits, right? So, you know, I used to look at it's like, oh, I'll work out and do yoga next week. That's not important. I have important things to do. That's entirely wrong. And I suffered mentally as a result of not understanding that for a long time. Those beneficial routines and habits, they don't just create stability in our lives, they actually set us up to grow, right? And then edge is this idea of like, okay, so I'm eating well, I'm living in a nice place, I have good relationships in my life, I take self-care to be seriously. Edge then is the thing where we want to continually push towards what's fascinating for us. Joseph Campbell coined the term like follow your bliss. He later said that he wished he'd said follow your blisters. You know, it's that thing that everybody actually has this internal compass and this internal sense of like something is when you know when something is fascinating because you're engaged, right? And you're not thinking, you know, you're in the moment in a sense. And when you can find those things that fascinate you and go towards them, and put yourself on the edge, and you also put yourself on the edge by creating these positive routines in your life. Like every morning I wake up, I don't want to do breath work. I want to just roll over and go back to sleep. But, you know, the act of forcing myself to get up and do it, that in itself is a little bit of an edge. And so, you know, that's become a huge part of my philosophy. And the other thing then we see in nature is this idea of compound interest. And what I mean by that is, so if you take a damaged ecosystem like a desert, and you look at the way the rain works on that, the rain will fall and it'll just like run over the surface and it'll take everything away with it. And so that's an ecosystem that's essentially in kind of like a downward spiral, right? Okay. The opposite of that is when we get plants growing on that, and we get, you know, ground covers and bushes covering.
Then the ground
the ground can hold the water, and what that means is that every time it rains, more and more water seeps in. That means the plants grow even more, and again that means you get a shortening of the hydrological cycle because you get more evaporation coming off the plants. And so the more it rains, once you get into the upward spiral, the more water then is held in the ecosystem, and the more life it can support, and the more the plants, you know, the more the plants grow and deposit that organic matter on the soil, the more humus there is in the soil, which also then compounds and increases the capacity to hold on to water. And again, we're just the same. It's like every day that you get up and you do your positive routine, and you know, whatever it is for you, you do your yoga and your meditation or your workout and your breath work, or, you know, whatever it is, those little changes compound. And so you're setting up the conditions necessary for you to grow as a person. And that's why I find so interesting about growth, because you can't, you know, we come from this culture and Western culture of like self-improvement, but that kind of implies that you can force yourself to improve. And of course, you know, you can no more force yourself to improve than a tree can force itself to grow. But by letting go of that idea and kind of accepting that actually maybe we're just designed to grow, and if we set up the right conditions, the same way we just add compost to the soil and put the plant in, we don't then try to make the plant grow, we just set the right conditions for the growth to occur. And I think things become progressively easier if we do that, right?
Yeah, wow. Thank you for bringing this distinction, and it's great to hear that. And I hear how people can come here and student and really to learn how to grow here with the farm, they see the land, they connect, and then they also can implement those principles that you're talking about within themselves.
Yeah, and exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's great. Thank you for learning the distinctions. And I can talk to you for hours more. And I know that you need to go soon, and we're gonna take a tour around the farm also. So just one last thing for people that watching this, what do you wanna share? Maybe an invitation or maybe something like that they can come and see that and kind of get this experience, because I already feel like I'm part of this experience here with you. So
yeah, well, you know, you can come. Right now, like I say, we're in a bit of a transition phase, but you can come and visit us anytime. You come stay at the farm, enjoy the delicious food. Tonight, Friday night, is our community open mic night, so it's a great time if you're a musician. Come and play some songs, tell some stories. We love doing that. We on our website soon we will have the calendar up for our educational programs. Like I say, right now we're in a little bit of flux with that, and please feel free to write, because we're extremely open here at the farm to receiving groups and working with people who also have their own offerings to give. you know, be they yoga, be they exercise, be they hiking, and want to maybe combine it with what we already offer. We're also like extremely open and interested in collaborations like that. And very, very shortly we're about to launch our new online accelerated learner and coaching program, and that's specifically aimed at people who want to learn about permaculture, who want to become permaculture designers, but who also want to commit to this path of personal growth. So watch this space on that one, I'd say.
Wow, thank you, Neal. Thank you for this interview. Thank you for taking a stand for edge workers that can come here and learn how to do this inner and outer permaculture. Thank you. And yeah,
thank you, Dor.
Excited to talk to you again and see more of the farm.